On a lonely stretch of highway, a scrappy stray dog named Alex dared to stand his ground against a roaring gang of bikers, then led them deep into the woods, straight to a retired ranger's hidden sanctuary. What unfolded beneath those ancient pines would shatter their cruelty and transform hardened hearts forever. Are you ready to see how one dog's courage can rewrite a story of compassion? Every evening, as the sky burned with the soft pink and purple hues of sunset, a lone dog wandered along the shoulder of a busy highway, his coat a patchwork of tangled brown and white, heavy with dirt and neglect. His ribs like fragile slats of driftwood beneath stretched skin, yet in his amber eyes there burned something fierce, a spark of hope that refused to be snuffed out by hunger or fear. Each step was an act of will, each sniff at discarded scraps an act of faith that there might be something, anything left behind by passing cars, a morsel of kindness he had learned never to expect, yet could not live without. He had no name, no home, no soft bed to curl into when the chill of night crept in. All he had was the road, the setting sun, and the quiet stubbornness in his heart that said, "I will survive." One warm evening, the rumble of motorcycles rolled down the highway like thunder, and a pack of leather-clad riders crested the hill, engines growling with amusement. They circled the weary dog as though he were a curiosity at a circus, tossing him half-eaten sandwiches with mocking grins, clapping their gloved hands in exaggerated barks, and delighting in his confusion and reluctance to approach. Then, with a cruel flare, their leader produced a small firecracker, lighting it with a flick of his lighter and hurling it toward the trembling creature. The sharp crack of the explosion sent the dog scrambling backward, his tail tucked between his legs, heart hammering, as if it wanted to break free of his chest, but only for a moment. Instead of fleeing into the darkness, the dog paused, his sides heaving with ragged breaths, his ears pricked forward as though trying to understand why these roaring giants would torment him. Then, gathering every ounce of his battered courage, he took a cautious step forward, then another, until he stood before the man who had lit the firecracker, nose twitching, head tilted in silent question, tail wagging hesitantly as though offering a fragile olive branch of peace. The bikers fell silent. Even the mocking laughter died on their lips, as they watched this small wounded soul stand his ground, unflinching in the face of their cruelty. In that hush, something shifted in the leader's heart, something he had not felt since childhood, a faint echo of compassion, long buried under layers of bravado and rough laughter. He slid off his bike, the heavy steel groaning beneath his weight, and crouched down to the dog's level. He extended a calloused hand, palm up, and in that simple gesture, so small yet so profound, man and dog bridged a chasm of fear and loneliness. The dog sniffed the outstretched fingers, then pressed his cold nose against warm skin, eyes softening as he tasted the possibility of trust. For a fleeting instant, time stood still, the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in deeper shades of gold, as if blessing this unspoken promise of understanding. And then, as the motorbikes roared "Dad" to life, and the riders swung onto their seats, the man returned to his friends. His expression changed, his gaze quietly respectful of the creature he had once tried to scare away. Unseen by the bikers, the dog watched them ride off into the sunset, his heart swelling with something new, pride perhaps, or the knowledge that he had made a difference, even to those who had meant him harm. That night, as the stars emerged like silent witnesses overhead, the dog slipped into the shadows of the woods beyond the highway, carrying with him the weight of the evening's unlikely bond. He had shown his bravery and his capacity to forgive, and in return, he had awakened a sliver of kindness in a hardened heart. Though he had neither bed nor bowl waiting for him, he walked with a lighter step, certain that somewhere out there compassion existed, ready to be claimed by anyone courageous enough to reach for it. And so, under the vast canopy of night, the stray dog continued his journey, wounded but unbowed, alone but no longer lonely, guided by the hope that one day, he would find a forever home and leave behind the highway's cold, indifferent edge. Deep in a quiet, moonlit forest, far from the roar of engines and the harsh glare of headlights, lived a gentle man who had once walked beside Alex as his devoted companion, a retired park ranger whose weathered hands and kind eyes told of decades spent protecting the wild. His home was a humble sanctuary of fallen logs and leafy clearings, where the scent of pine needles mingled with the soft rustle of sleeping creatures. When Alex slipped into the ranger's camp that evening, a slip of black tape on a small packet caught the old man's eye, and he recognized it at once as evidence of the bikers' wrongdoing, a dangerous secret they had foolishly stashed among their saddlebags. Without hesitation, the ranger knew this was the moment to act, to teach these brash men a lesson in empathy that they would never forget. With a voice as calm as a gentle breeze, he whispered instructions to Alex, and together they set a plan into motion that would turn the hunters into the hunted, but not with violence or malice, only with the subtle power of fear and the reminder of each man's own forgotten vulnerability. First came the animal calls, low whoops and soft barks that echoed through the trees like lost spirits, stirring. Then came hidden growls, amplified by clever devices that mimicked the powerful chorus of wolves, circling just beyond sight. And finally, shadowy silhouettes danced between gnarled trunks, playing tricks on the bikers' flickering flashlight beams. One by one, the men's laughter faltered, their swagger abandoned as they realized they were not in control, that the night, the forest, and the creatures who called it home had drawn them into a web of their own mistaken cruelty. As the clever ruses accumulated, the clearing grew heavy with tension, and the bikers' once unshakable bravado cracked under the weight of their own fear, until at last they stood surrounded by silence and watching eyes, a silent assembly of dogs whose unwavering gaze spoke of a bond forged by kindness and trust, a bond they had once scorned. It was then that the ranger stepped into the moonlight beside Alex, his tall frame an emblem of quiet authority. He looked each man in the eye, and the darkness of the forest seemed to fall away, leaving nothing but the truth of their actions exposed. The mocking screams and cruel jokes that had once lifted their spirits now echoed hollowly in their minds, replaced by shame so deep it made their chests ache. In that charged stillness, the ranger's voice was soft but resolute as he spoke of compassion, of the duty every person bears to protect the weak, and of the pain they had inflicted on an innocent soul whose only crime was to trust when all he knew was neglect. He offered no violence, only a mirror for their cruelty and a chance for redemption. An apology would not suffice, he told them, for words alone could wash away neither the guilt that clung to their hearts nor the suffering they had caused. To truly make amends, they would have to prove their remorse through action, to feed, to clean, to nurture, to show in every gentle gesture that they understood the weight of their wrongdoing and were committed to change. As the first pale rays of dawn filtered through the pine, illuminating the dew on trembling leaves, something remarkable happened. Talon, the leader, whose laughter had once stung like a whip, lowered his head and spoke a single unguarded word, "I'm sorry," followed by Jesse's quiet confession of guilt and Snake's trembling agreement. And in that moment of raw humility, as the ranger's sanctuary bore witness to the bikers' first honest admissions, a fragile bridge of trust began to form between man and dog, between the selfish past and the compassionate future. They stood together in the forest clearing, 3 men and a pack of rescued strays, bound by the shared knowledge that true strength lies not in domination, but in kindness, not in fear, but in empathy, and that the greatest lesson the ranger could teach was that healing begins when we face our own hearts and choose, with every gentle act, to become the protectors we were once too blind to be. Night at the sanctuary. Through a long, humbling night under a canopy of twinkling stars, Talon and Jesse found themselves swapping the roar of engines for the gentle lullaby of crickets and whispering pines as they labored side by side in the ranger's humble sanctuary, a collection of simple wooden kennels nestled among ferns and mossy stones. Their first task was cleaning the kennels, scooping clumps of straw and clearing the damp earth, each shovelful a reminder of the neglect they had once celebrated rather than condemned. Next came feeding time, when they filled water bowls and scattered nutritious kibble across the ground, watching with growing wonder as trembling noses emerged from behind slatted doors to snuffle and lap gratefully. At first, their movements were hesitant and stiff, awkward hands fumbling with squeaky toys, hesitant strokes that brushed too roughly against a dog's neck. But as the hours passed, something shifted. The hard edges of their bravado softened, and they began to learn the language of gentle care. When a timid pup let out a small whimper, Jesse crouched beside it with a soothing tone, his own voice cracking as he murmured, "It's okay, buddy," and offered a comforting pat that turned the frightened whine into a soft sigh of relief. Snake, whose laughter once rang with ridicule, found himself offering a kind word to an older dog with graying muzzle, brushing away a tear that welled unexpectedly in his own eye when the animal leaned into his touch. Talon, the leader who had once reveled in the thrill of mocking a stray, knelt beside Alex and whispered an apology his heart had long denied, feeling the dog's warm body press against him as if forgiving him in that simple embrace. Overhead, fireflies danced like tiny lanterns, their flickering lights reflecting in the men's eyes, as laughter and tears mingled in equal measure. Laughter at the pure joy of playing tug-of-war with a frisky puppy whose energy seemed boundless. Tears at the realization that such trust could bloom from broken beginnings, both in the dogs' lives and in their own. In that shared toil, each man felt the quiet wisdom in a wagging tail, the unspoken lesson that compassion could heal wounds deeper than any biker's scar or highway scratch. A bittersweet farewell, as the first pale fingers of dawn stretched across the treetops, painting the shelter in soft gold. A battered old truck rumbled in at the sanctuary's edge, drawing the attention of every dog and man alike. Out of the truck climbed a middle-aged gentleman whose eyes shone with anxious hope, his gaze locked on Alex as if searching for a lost piece of his own heart. When Alex bounded forward, recognizing the voice that once called him friend and family, there was no hesitation. Tears streamed down the man's face as he dropped to his knees, arms wide, welcoming his companion home. Talon's chest tightened at the sight, an ache of joy for Alex's reunion mixed with a twinge of sorrow for their own parting. But he knew deep down that true love means knowing when to let go. With a nod to Ranger and a final pat on Alex's head, he released his hold, allowing the dog to leap into the arms of the man who had waited so long. In that bittersweet moment, Talon felt a transformation stir within him, pride in having protected and cared for Alex, grief at the loss of a friend who had become a beacon of his own redemption, and hope for what might come next when his heart was unburdened by cruelty. A new path forward, as the engines of their motorcycles split the morning stillness. Talon, Snake and Jesse climbed aboard with lighter hearts than they had ever known. Clipped to their leather jackets were handcrafted tags bearing the names of every dog they had tended that night, a promise etched in wood and leather to keep kindness alive wherever the road might lead. The wind rushed past them as they rode out of the sanctuary, but it felt different now, not the roaring wind of empty freedom, but the steady breath of a journey with purpose. Each mile stretched before them like an open invitation to become the men they glimpsed in the quiet flicker of a dog's grateful eyes. No longer bound by the hollow thrill of mocking strays or the reckless camaraderie of the old crew, they carried with them the humbling lessons learned in that forest clearing, that real strength is measured not by the noise you make but by the compassion you show, that true loyalty is earned through caring hands and open hearts, and that the courage to change one's path is the most powerful ride of all. And so, with the horizon unfolding in shades of promise, they rode on, three former bikers whose engines echoed a new anthem, one of empathy, respect and a lifelong commitment to protect the vulnerable, knowing that wherever they went, there would always be work to do, hearts to heal, and stories of hope waiting to be written under the wide open sky.